Now for another In the Legal Know. Vincent J. Russo is back discussing wills and addressing the critical question, do you leave your assets equally divided among your children? Vincent is here, and I would think that answer's obvious, but not so much, right? Of course not.
That's right. Most people think in terms of equal distribution to their children. It's that simple. And many will take the easy path in making that decision as well. And in most cases, it's probably the right decision. But family circumstances may be that it would make more sense to leave assets in an unequal manner that might favor one child over another for a particular reason. So every situation has to be looked at on its own. An equal inheritance or an equitable inheritance? That's the question that I raise with, and people look at me like, what do you mean?
I'm looking at you like that right now.
So equal inheritance means you divide the money up perfectly equally among the children. An equitable inheritance is a situation where you say, let's look at the circumstances here. And perhaps there's a child that has greater needs. So would it make more sense to leave more assets for them as an equitable distribution? So that's a key takeaway that I try to share with clients when they come in, when they're thinking about how am I going to leave my assets? That's the big question. Is it going to be equal, or are we going to do it in some other fashion? And sometimes it makes sense to do it in some other way. For example, when grandchildren are now in the family, that might alter how you think about leaving assets, or there's a second marriage. So circumstances should be considered.
So these are the circumstances. You want to say that unequal assets are distributed among your children. Those are, do you have other, I know you talk about children, grandchildren, but what else?
Yeah, so let's look at some situations here. Let's say you have a child who's disabled or has special needs. They would have more of a need for financial assistance and assets. Makes sense to take care of that child. You do it when they're minors, so why should it change now that they're adults? A child has acted as your caregiver for an extended period of time, and maybe you want to thank them in some fashion. Seems reasonable, seems fair. Perhaps one child has received more money during your lifetime. You helped maybe purchase a home for that child. But the other child, you didn't do that. So maybe you want to have some adjustment there. Maybe the child's really financially sound. One child is really well off and the other isn't. So maybe you want to help the child who isn't. Maybe the child participates in the family business. So do you want to leave the family business equally? Or do you want to leave it for the child who's actively involved? So lots of situations that we consider. You know, life is complicated.
Yeah, boy, it is.
And so the simple, easy route, leave it all to the children equally, sounds good, but I would say pause.
Yeah, okay. I'm guessing that some issues will arise, you know, if you leave your assets unequally among your children.
That's right. And so a major consideration, if you're going to consider leaving assets in differing amounts, will it create family disharmony? Will it create friction and bad will among your children? Because when we sit down with parents, they just want their children to be happy. They want their children to get along. And so that's a consideration that has to be considered. Will you having left your assets in differing amounts result in one child suing the estate because they're unhappy about it? And so there are two grounds for suing. One is undue influence, where the child who's unhappy will say, well, you know, my brother forced my mother to change her will and put pressure. Especially we see it when the child's living in the household of the parent. That child sometimes will exert undue influence. Or the other argument would be lack of capacity, that the parent didn't understand what they were doing. Those are the two legal grounds. They're tough to prove, but it doesn't stop a family member from commencing a lawsuit and creating havoc, emotional distress, disharmony. So you have to consider that.
Okay, and considering that, how would someone really, those challenges, like protect their wishes ahead of time?
Okay, so there are steps and that can be taken. So one is the no contest provision. So someone can put in their will that I'm disinheriting a child, and if they do challenge my will, they are disinherited. But you would want to leave them some money so there's an incentive for them not to challenge. But that's a legal step. Other steps could be set up a revocable living trust, much harder to challenge than a will. And so that's another way of protecting your desires. Keep the child out of the process who may be benefiting in a greater amount. Don't have them in the meetings with the lawyer. Don't ask for their opinion as to what should be done. Keep them out of the process. And then lastly, and this is so important, talk to your children. Let them know what you're doing.
After the process.
Right. That's right. After the process, communicate with them. I've made this decision. If they're unhappy, deal with it while the parent's alive. And that's really key. And I know so many people are uncomfortable doing that.
Yeah, boy, this is all, you want to keep peace in your family. What would you say the bottom line here?
Okay, the bottom line here is they're your assets. It's your family. You understand the dynamics of your family, and then make a decision. What makes sense? What do you in your heart want to do in terms of leaving your assets to your children, whether it's equal or in differing amounts, and in what manner? So I'm there for the parent.
And you're there. You also you always offer free resources. Your website is what?
Yes.
More information.
We have guides on our website at VJRusso.law/guides.
Okay.
Lots of resources.
Great. Because we need them.
Great.
As always, thank you. So great to see you 2 days in a row.
Yes, that was wonderful.